And good morning, everybody. This is Sherman Ray, Black Success Magazine, the podcast. It is Thursday, and we have got another exciting show for you today, folks. We've got a special guest on. So, for those of you that are joining us via YouTube or you're on Facebook Live, that you're in for a treat today. We're putting a new segment together, and it's called Financial Thursdays, Success and Your Finances. And so we've got a special guest on today. We're going to talk all about business finance. But before we do that, let's do a little housekeeping. For those of you that this might be the first time you're ever even checking out Black Success Magazine. We really encourage you to go to our website, which is www.blacksuccessmagazine.com. Check out our website, and on that page, you're going to see videos. You'll get to have articles, and of course the podcast, because the podcast has been around for quite a while now, and we've got episodes. We're actually in our fourth season now. Can you believe that? So we're in our fourth season. So just go to blacksuccessmagazine.com. And you can check that out. Also, the magazine is out. So the magazine for Black Success Magazine came out, and it's on the front page. Just go to our website, and you can check that out. And just go to the bottom of the page. So it's right there, and then click it, and you can actually open it all up. Articles on some great folks. Marcus Johnson's in there. I don't know if some of you knew this, but there are actually quite a few Black vintners or people who own vineyards, the vineyard owners on. And we've got an article on there about that also. So check out Black Success Magazine on our website. So today, once again, we're talking about success. This is our success and finance, and we've got a special guest on with us today. We brought on Robby Thomas. Robby Thomas is the CEO of GenRise. And Robby, give us the correct pronunciation. So you're the CEO of GenRise, and GenRise is what?
GenRise is an economic empowerment platform, and so we provide consultation services, we provide content, we provide education around being empowered financially. So it really focuses on credit education, money management education, and a host of other kinds of unique tools that can really help an individual or small business owner move from, being in a place where they're not as sure what to do versus, being able to move their business and grow their business going forward.
Oh, fantastic. So, Robby, one of the things that at Black Success Magazine we try to do is we talk about success, and really in life, one of the things that we're finding out more and more and more is, Black entrepreneurs and people on a success journey begin to look at their life. It looks like I'm the CEO of GenRise. Is that you've got more and more people looking at their finances, and really, but we've got some issues in our own society with historically about finances, and that's really kind of what we want to kind of talk about today, is just kind of getting into the historical issues with not only Blacks in business, but just kind of in general. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about PPP loans, that kind of stuff. But so kind of give us an overview, Robby, of where you see or what you've seen in your day-to-day with business owners, as far as, some of the commonalities, or, somebody comes in off the street and they say, "Hey, Robby, I want to talk about money." What are some of the things that you're already seeing, and it's kind of common to most people?
Well, for a lot of business owners, what I've seen and continue to see is that people have a passion for doing a particular thing, whether it be opening a restaurant, cooking, or doing some type of skill that they had and they've shaped into a business opportunity. Open a brick and mortar, or working from their homes, or what have you. A lot of Black-owned businesses are really smaller. They're more micro businesses than they are, by definition, a small business, which is, having hundreds of employees. So a lot of small businesses, they have a great passion for doing what they do. They don't always have the structure, the managerial or the management structure that they need to accommodate growth. And so that's one of the areas that I focus in on, in terms of the structure of a business. But you also see that they don't have a lot of the compliance issues. For example, the business is not set up in a way, accounting wise, that they're able to use their accounting in a way to attract credit or to attract financing capital and those kinds of things. So we try to make sure that we create a opportunity for them to learn about this, and so that they can apply these unique principles, which is basically business principles, to their small business, and so they can begin to scale and maximize their opportunities.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Robby, that's probably one of the most interesting things about it. We were talking about, and I saw this on a news program, just recently, and they were talking about I think in Oregon it was, that they're actually they set aside like $60 million for the Black community, business owners, and people got really upset about that.
Right.
And I don't think people really realize the historical difference between Black entrepreneurs, Black families, and white America, or even Hispanic or Asian Americans, and how it's almost like there needs to be a massaging, of getting Black Americans to get into the whole banking system a lot more. It's not as though we don't ever do it, so I don't want to ever make that assumption or make that as a general statement. But based upon what you're already starting to bring up, are there any historical differences between the way Black Americans view banking, the banking system, finances, and are there any shortcomings that you're already seeing?
This is such a passion of mine because, I literally grew up in the system, and I've seen up close some of the challenges that African Americans have dealing with banks, because banks have systematically excluded African Americans over time. And so the importance of Black-owned financial institutions becomes really even that much more important. And since the 80s, we've witnessed a decrease of Black-owned financial institutions. And so they play a very critical role in providing products, services, leverage to the Black owned business owner and Black owned businesses in general. But what's more important is that they create a unique ecosystem where businesses basically go to the bank. The bank then use that money to lend to the community. The community in turn banks at that financial institution. So it creates this a beautiful ecosystem. If you don't have a Black bank in a Black community, that money goes outside of the community, and by necessity, not because it absolutely wants to. There's this notion that Black money doesn't stay in the Black community for a very long time, and that is true. But you have to put sort of this. You got to pivot on that point, because it's not because it wants to, or because there's a real absolute. People aren't thinking about banking with a Black-owned institution or doing business with a Black-owned institution. We just don't have the capability of turning that money over in those communities, because there aren't that many financial institutions that can leverage that money. So that's one of the
Robby, and
problems for us.
Yeah, I hate to step on you on that one, because this is very interesting, because a lot of people really don't. I mean, it sounds to me, a lot of people could look in on this conversation and go, oh, there's just these two guys just talking about finances, what do they know? But Robby, you actually worked in the financial sphere. Give us a little insight. What did you actually do with the in finance?
I actually started as a teller, as a file clerk at a bank while I was going to school as a student, and eventually liked the industry and stayed in the industry for well over 20 years. I've worked in every position from, bank manager to assistant manager to even a market salesperson. So I've, been in the situation where I've seen up close all the very difficult kinds of situations that communities face, but also meeting a lot of people who come into those spaces, whether it be business owners or contractors or people that came to the banks for loans, mortgages, and every kind of financial service that most people use from birth to death, right? So they want to plan for college, they want to plan for a wedding, even for a vacation, they want to start a business, all of these different things, and requires a different type of conversation. But also their personal challenges that people needed to overcome dealing with banks, the suspicion of, not being treated properly or being discriminated against. So all of these things you kind of come to understand and learn that there's a way to handle that. But I've also sat on boards that also were advocate type organizations trying to deal with some of the challenges, those systemic challenges. CRA was a good a law that prevented banks from taking money in communities that they did not lend in. So part of the solution is making sure that there's good policy, public policy, but also laws that prevent banks from behaving in a certain way. But the importance of Black-owned institutions cannot be overemphasized.
Yeah, and right now in America, how many Black-owned banks are there? Do you know?
That's a good question. I think we probably have maybe 21 or 20, between 21 and 22 Black-owned financial institutions. Yeah, I mean, compared to every other minority group, we're probably the least, and we used to be in the hundreds. There is a need to really focus on financial-owned institutions that are serving the African-American communities, because it really makes a big difference.
Yeah, and so for those of you who are just joining us today, this is Black Success Magazine podcast, and we're talking, this is our Financial Thursdays, new segment that we're launching. We're talking about success and your finances with Robby Thomas, who is our industry expert. He's also, and Robby, you're the CEO of GenRise, which is a financial consulting company, if it's probably the best way to put it, I guess.
Sure.
Really just kind of we're giving an introduction to what we see in the Black community as far as money. So for those, the buying power of Black institutions or the Black community is something that people have talked about a lot. We were talking about it with Robby and I. So for full disclosure, Robby and I talk all the time. Robby is we are partners in crime here, folks. And Robby is so generous to lend his expertise to the Black Success Magazine. But we were talking with a gentleman who's going to be opening an airport or an airlines here in Las Vegas. Right. And as we're talking about it, we were talking about the Black buying power, the amount of money that actually Black people are able to generate. And Robby, can you kind of give us kind of we don't have to get into the details of it, but what level are the amount of money that Black people actually, spend in relationship to the rest of the world, I guess, at least in America?
So, there's been conversations about this for the last 20, 30 years, the Black buying power and how do we spend our money and where do we spend our money? But here's the interesting conversation that we haven't had about that specific phrase that, the buying power is 1.2 trillion, or it's, I remember when that was maybe $900 billion somewhere in the 90s, what have you. Anyway, we're unique buying block that has an extreme amount of buying power, but that's not an exact science. And so the way that number is derived is from Nielsen, doing some of the surveys that they do to really gauge the average buying power for certain segments of a community. So for the purposes of promoting and marketing, that's where that number originally came from. So there isn't a real study that has been done on the buying power of any group, because we don't really break down specific studies like that. To my knowledge, there isn't a real study. However, it's a good conversation, right? It's not a scientific-driven research piece. So that's number one.
But we can say on
Yeah,
that point, we can say that blacks actually have a significant amount, generate a significant amount of money
absolutely.
that's spent in America.
Absolutely. One of the
Yeah.
areas too that I focused on is, most black owned businesses are not doing business with a black owned bank.
Yeah.
And so if you are really looking at how we can leverage our dollars, if we're able
Mhm.
to put those dollars into a black owned institution, it
Mm.
really can work for us in a different kind of way. Because right now, I can guarantee you probably 90% of black owned businesses are putting money into a non-black owned bank. And what
And
that means is
therein
now,
lies the power.
exactly. And so
Okay.
it's great. It's great to support black-owned businesses, but the ecosystem is broken, and we need to be able to sort of close that loop.
So talk to us a little bit about this ecosystem, because I know we
Yes.
touched on it earlier in the
Yes.
conversation. What are we talking about when you're saying an ecosystem? What are you
Yes.
talking about as far as black businesses and black families and black
Right.
banks?
Yeah, it's a very important piece because if you're earning dollars and you don't put those dollars into a black-owned institution, you don't have the benefit of leveraging it in the community. So, what banks do with money in a community is circulate it. They leverage it. They are able to give loans. They're able to give mortgages, and so that area or community is able to utilize that money to do different things. In other words, you're getting more bang for the buck, so to speak. If you don't
Mhm.
have an opportunity to do that, then the money leaves the community. So one of the other challenges with, some of the communities of color that have a lot of money, the people that actually earn a lot of money and don't have the services that people need. For example, auto dealers that might not be auto dealers of color. You have to buy cars at another dealership out of your community that doesn't necessarily use that money that they earn to put it back into the community. So you really have to look at how that bank leverages the money and the ecosystem around it. In other words, the small businesses that are around that bank or around those communities. Black churches, for example, if they're not banking with black-owned banks, then that money leaves the community. So it's very important to understand how that money, the velocity of money as it moves through various communities, and look at how it can do some more good by channeling
Mhm.
that money through financial institutions that are black-owned or institutions that are black-owned in general.
That
Does that make
that is
sense?
amazing, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this because you got me thinking
Yes.
that there is in Las Vegas. Let's just take Las Vegas for an
Yes.
example. The historic west side of Las Vegas. There is one bank on the historic west side of Las Vegas,
Mhm.
and I remember sitting in with a group a number of years ago, and how they were complaining that that one bank, and we won't name it
Mhm.
unless we really want to, it did not loan money to the businesses in that area. And there might have been 6 or 7 of them, or even
Right.
more than that. There were actually quite a few
Right.
more that were right within 100 yards of them, and they wouldn't loan money to those banks. So having a black owned bank, and I guess this is a great place to focus on,
Yeah.
having a black owned bank that loans money within the black community.
Yes.
How much of a difference do you think that would make? And let's talk not just businesses, but even churches, because churches.
Well,
Oh,
by definition, a church is a business. It might
yeah,
be a nonprofit business.
yes,
So, and hey, you have to run like a business. Spent a lot of time, being on the board of churches and being an administrator for churches and stuff like that. So I understand it's one of those institutions that really needs to be on the forefront of partnering with financial institutions because of their membership and the mortgages that they may need, the business loans they need. So when I say ecosystem, we're talking about really looking at the whole financial picture in a different way.
mm,
And we need to be taught about that because we're not a group that practices group economics. If you listen to people like I guess his name escaped me, Claude Anderson, for example, he talks a lot about group economics. But I think it's really important to have the key or the main Black-owned institutions. Historically, Black churches have been on the forefront of the civil rights movement. They've been on the forefront of, but now we really need to look at what John Hope Bryan refers to as the civil right movement, right? So civil rights as opposed to civil, and that's an economic move towards self-empowerment and being able to have our own institutions that understands the nuances of how we live, how we breathe, and how we operate in our own spaces. And so that's really, really important. So understanding where we are is the basis. What do we need to accomplish as we look, towards the future, say 2022 and beyond? How can we take what we have and leverage it to the max? What types of things do we need to do to build our communities and to make us a little bit more economically empowered? We're rich in some areas, but in others we're not as wealthy. And so the work that we do is really about bridging the wealth gap.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this is the interesting thing about this kind of conversation is we talk in the Black community, we talk a lot about civil rights, and we talk a lot about sports, we talk a lot about entertainment,
right? But
we never talk about money. We never talk about money. And in other communities, and since I'm not privy to them all the time, I don't know what their conversation is. But I know in the Jewish community, and I will take that as an example, finance is like high. I mean, other than reading the Torah, that's pretty much right there. That one little tweak about just changing the narrative a little bit and saying, okay, instead of talking about Jordans, let's talk about 401ks. Or let's talk about how much money are you putting in savings as opposed to how much money are you spending, buying a $40,000 worth of grill work on your teeth, that kind of stuff. What kind of change do you think would happen? Or can you see that happening? And is that really something GenRise is actually fighting for?
Well, yeah, I one of the reasons I started GenRise is because, I actually did this work prior to starting the company 5 years ago. So it's really about looking at, what you can bring to a community. What's the best use of your skill, your time, and also how does that align with your passions? And so it's important for us to take what we have, whether you've worked in an industry that, like the financial industry, for example, where you've seen up close the importance of being financially savvy, as I also saw a lot of Black successful people. One of the most important events for me as a young man was being able to meet a person who was, I thought, person that came to my desk, unassuming African-American gentleman, not well dressed per se. I wasn't saying that he looked like a bum, but he actually was modestly dressed and came to my desk and asked me, about some of the products that we offer. And long story short, he basically dropped $500,000 down.
What?
For me to set up an account for him. That time was just amazing, right? It was one of the biggest accounts I opened at the time. And after the conversation was over, he said, "You know what? I like you. Let me write another check." And he opened up and wrote another check for $500,000 again, in the same sit-in. You know what I mean? In the same situation. Wow. So he dropped $1 million on my desk. And it changed my perception about how I look at people that look like me. Wow. Because I think sometimes we think that because a person of color, looks a certain way, that they don't have money, and we equate a certain look to money, and so we start, wearing the bling and all that kind of stuff, and so people that have bling, we kind of associate that with success. And I think we need to change that narrative and learn that money doesn't have to prove anything, and so we change that cultural dynamic and be able to see money for what it is. It's simply a tool. And a lot of people are good with money. You don't know that they're good with money because they don't show you that they're good with money. You just see them doing things like owning buildings or owning, businesses and things of that nature. So financial literacy, financial and economic literacy is really important for us to change the dynamics of what we see in our day-to-day lives in our communities.
Robby, you said you are the Pied Piper of finance in my mind, because you said something very interesting. Yeah. I have probably more friends who are multimillionaires, who I actually personally work with and personally talk to on a weekly basis, than I have friends who are not millionaires. Okay, and I'm not bragging about that. It's just kind of a fact. None of them, to a man, ever, you would never know any of them are multimillionaires. Any of them, because they dress like you or I. Actually, you would be overdressed. Yeah, because none of my friends ever wear a suit. I mean, they don't. I've never. Some of them I've never seen them. No, only one of them that I've ever seen in a suit. All of the other ones are always wearing regular clothes, because you're saying something. You said something very interesting. Money does not have to prove itself. It doesn't. It does not have to prove that it's legitimate. It is what it is.
I've been around franchise owners. I'm talking about major league owners. And when you get to a certain level of money, it's not that important anymore. You know what's important? Relationships. Yeah. So they want to be able to pick up the phone and get something done, right? Yeah. Because you can't have that many houses. You can't sleep in all of them at the same time. So it's important, people are, when I teach people about money, and I do workshops, especially for, people that are, in churches and things of that nature, I always go back to a spiritual principle, because it all comes down to stewardship, right? It's about really managing what you've been given, whether it be a talent or time or any type of resource. What I try to tell people is that money must have purpose. And so if you don't have a purpose for your money, the large retailers in the world will, right? So you've got to make sure that you have a very clear understanding of what you're going to do with the resources you have. I go into a whole different kind of conversation when I teach, because it's a very spiritual thing. Money is a real spiritual thing. The Bible talks about God and money in the same sentence. So we really have to understand it. And there's a psychological relationship to money that we have to break. What is money used for? And how do you accumulate it? You can only do several things with money. You can earn it, you can save it, you can invest it, and you can give it. And, unless we kind of understand those things, then we tend to not understand how to handle money. Because you can actually you can win the lottery tomorrow and be broke in a year. And it happens quite often. So there's a real specific thing that we need to understand about how to handle money, because not everybody can.
That's true. Yeah. So Robby, we're gonna have to end here, but people are going to want to. I know people are already saying, "How do I get a hold of Robby?" Because we want to make sure. So if people want to talk to you, Robby, how are they going to get a hold of you? Because you're going to be on next week.
Sure. You can get my email. I can give that to you right now, which is rthomas at genrise.com. And Genrise is spelled GEN-RISE.com. And I'd love to talk to you about economic empowerment.
Cool. So it's Gen-Rise. So rthomas at genrise.com. So that's a hyphen between. Cool.
Correct.
All right. So Robby Thomas has been with us here, folks, on our Financial Thursday show. And we're talking about success in your finances. He'll be back again next week. So next Thursday,
Right.
he'll be back. Thank you so much, Robby, for being a part of the show. And we
Real
will see.
quick, I know we promised to talk about PPP, and PPP actually starts tomorrow, the second round. So if you're interested in PPP, go to the SBA's website. They're looking to kick that off tomorrow, I believe the 15th. And so it begins tomorrow. Take a look at the website and obviously try to take advantage if you haven't been able to in the first round.
That's true. And we'll actually leave a link to that right below the show notes here today, too. So you'll be able to get that information. Robby, we will see you again next Thursday. Thank you so much, Robby.
Thanks for having me, Sherman.
And folks, this has been Sherman Ray, Black Success Magazine, the podcast. Wasn't that awesome? So we will be back again next week with Robby. Tomorrow, we actually have our open line Friday on Black Success Magazine. So be with us tomorrow, 8:30 in the morning. If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can go to our website at blacksuccessmagazine.com, or you can email me at info@blacksuccessmagazine.com, and you can email me for the show. So we'll talk to you again tomorrow, folks. It's been Sherman Ray, Black Success Magazine, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Or you can email me at info@blacksuccessmagazine.com.